Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Nation's Pastime in the nation's capital. I'm your host, Andrew Snaith, here with my host, Robbie Cruz. And Robbie, it is about to be March, and Bryce Harper is still not signed.
This has clearly been one of the craziest off seasons we have ever seen. We've never seen a superstar free agent like this. We've never seen a free agent who has this much potential and is only 26 years old. Most of the time when we see free agent, they've had a proven career, but yet Bryce Harper still has plenty of time. We have never seen a free agent like this, and this has been one of the craziest off seasons that we've ever had in the history of baseball.
Absolutely, and we'll get into talking about Harper in a little bit. Just to start it off, thank you again for tuning in to tonight's edition. Just to remind everyone, we're on every Tuesday, 6 to 7, talking about everything baseball related. And starting this week, we're now accepting calls for the near future. So if you wanted to call into the show, that number is 202-319-5106. And we will be repeating that throughout the broadcast in case anyone wants to chime in and talk a little baseball with us. So as we hop into the news here, let's take a look at some of the headlines from the past week, shall we, Robbie?
Sounds good.
So first up on the news is some big breaking news today out of Jeff Passan from ESPN. He reports that Nolan Arenado has reached an 8-year, $260 million extension with the Colorado Rockies. It gives him an opt-out after 3 years and a full no-trade clause. Robbie, thoughts on that?
Well, this most certainly came out of nowhere. I, for one, thought that Nolan Arenado was going to test his value in free agency. It seemed like it would have been perfect for him. I thought that the Yankees possibly could have pursued him and then made a traded for Miguel Andujar. However, it looked like Arenado, he clearly loved being in Colorado. He loves Coors Field. It's a great hitter's park. He's comfortable with the franchise. And the most interesting aspect of this contract is the opt-out after the third year. Nolan Arenado is going to be 28 when he has that opt-out clause, and he's most likely going to exercise it if he can perform well within these next 3 years, Andrew.
Absolutely, and it's funny that you mentioned that opt-out clause because that leads into our next topic. The fact that Nolan Arenado got this mega extension, got the money he wanted from the Rockies, but also got an opt-out after the third year, it really starts to question the market for Bryce Harper. Because as we heard from a report today, from Angelo Cataldi on 94 WIP in Philadelphia, but also backed up by Bob Nightingale on Twitter, it seems that the snag right now in the Phillies' negotiations with Bryce Harper is the opt-out year. And it sounds like Boris and Bryce Harper want that third-year opt-out, while the Phillies want a 4-year or 5-year opt-out. Now, Robbie, how do you think that today's Nolan Arenado extension and giving him that third opt-out affects the Phillies' chances of Bryce Harper?
Well, I think that it's not going to have too much of an impact, but I think it does have some impact whatsoever. I think that this opt-out clause gives Bryce Harper a reason to want an opt-out clause after 3 years. If Nolan Arenado can net an opt-out clause after the third year, I think Bryce Harper can do the same thing because they're very similar players, very similar age. Both are power hitters, and they can still hit for average every once in a while. But to me, it appears that Bryce Harper's going to get what he wants. I think he's going to get that opt-out clause after the third year, but he's still going to be seeking that long-term contract. This is simply because Scott Boras is his agent, and Scott Boras has never, ever gone down without a fight. Always wants the biggest contract. Always has. And it appears that Bryce Harper's going to take whichever team gives him the biggest offer, but he's going to seek that opt-out clause. It'll be really interesting to see what he can get.
I agree with that, and it's really interesting that you bring up that point about Boras never really losing in a fight, and it just seems very unlikely that we've waited this long in the offseason just for Bryce Harper to accept a short-term deal, whether it be from the Dodgers, where it's said that he prefers to play, whether it be the Giants, which is also on the West Coast. It just doesn't seem like that's something that Scott Boras would be satisfied doing, especially since his former client, Manny Machado, did get his 10 years and $300 million from the Padres.
And I most certainly think that Bryce Harper is going to be competing with that offer. He's going to want more than that offer. I think that his goal is to get around 330, 335, and I believe he will get what he wants. It's just a matter of that opt-out clause. I think if Bryce Harper ends up getting an opt-out clause after his fourth year rather than his third year, I think he's going to be perfectly okay. The dude's only 26 years old, and it appears he's going to get a big contract whatsoever. It's just a matter of I still think he's going to be okay, even if he gets an opt-out clause after a fourth year rather than a third year.
And absolutely. And looking at it from the Phillies' perspective, I know a lot of people in the front office are hesitant to give an opt-out so soon. But the way I look at it is that the worst thing that happens is you get 3 MVP caliber years from an all-star right fielder who's age 26, and then you either have to pay him more or let her walk. Or in reality, the other aspect would be he doesn't perform as well and they stay with them for 10 years. I think Bryce Harper would be foolish to turn down a just guaranteed 10 plus $300 million contract. That would set him for life, where if he took a short-term deal, he'd essentially be betting on himself, betting on his ability, and betting on his health to see if he'd be able to perform enough to get a bigger contract at age 29.
And it's not only that. If say he signs a short-term deal with the Los Angeles Dodgers, he's going to be signing for 3 or 4 years essentially. But the problem is, once that term is done, he's going to be 29 or 30 years old rather than just 26. In 2016 or 2015 it was, Jason Hayward literally netted $180 million. And one of the biggest reasons he got that contract was because he was only 26 when he was a free agent that year. So the fact that to matter is teams are going to want a young guy that's going to bring in fans, which is exactly what Bryce Harper is going to do. It's just a matter of, will he be willing to take a long-term contract or a short-term contract? I think he'd be smarter to go for the long-term just because it's going to cover him for life and he's not going to have to worry about losing money in the future. Also, with the direction that baseball is going, it looks like free agents are starting to get less money because teams are starting to produce better prospects. I was really surprised to see Manny Machado get $300 million, though. I'm not going to lie. I projected him to get about $260, $270, but $300 million. Just insane.
And we mentioned it on last week's broadcast as well, just with the fact that we thought that Machado's postseason antics and the stuff he did with the Dodgers at the end of the season last year would hurt his chances at getting a lot of money throughout free agency. And it turns out the Padres had no problem with any of those antics, and they gave him that $300 million.
Well, they did, and it'll be interesting to see how this contract works out in the future.
Absolutely, it will. So moving on to some other MLB headlines here. We have some spring training action finally as the first official game started last Friday. The other day, I think it was yesterday, James Paxton took the hill for the first time as a New York Yankee. But more interestingly enough, we see Troy Tulowitzki in his first at-bat since 2017 takes Marcus Stroman deep to right field for a home run.
That was just such a great moment as a Yankee fan, being able to witness it on TV live. Truly a special feeling, and it had to mean a lot for Troy Tulowitzki. Even though it was just a spring training game, it shows that he's in good shape. It shows that he's clearly worked hard. The fact that he hasn't played a baseball game in nearly 3 years. He comes back in the first at-bat, he hits a home run. He looks like he's in really good shape. It's clear that his body just looks more athletic. I was watching videos of him defend the other day, and he looks really good. I'm very excited to see how he can do this season.
Yeah, it's very true, and I think even though it was spring training, as we mentioned, it's still definitely a big confidence booster for Troy Tulowitzki, a guy who's trying to make the comeback here at age 35, I believe, or 34.
35.
35, yes. He's 35 now, and of course, ironically, against the team that cut him, and against the Blue Jays, of course. And I think the question that this really leads into is, does Tulowitzki have a good bounce-back year in return? Obviously, he won't turn to the player that we knew as him as in his prime, but will he return to at least a solid force at shortstop? Do you think he does that this year with the New York Yankees, or do you think that he reverts back to his injury-prone form?
I actually believe he's going to have a bounce-back season. I was telling Andrew this the other day. Troy Tulowitzki is always at his greatest when he's going against all odds. As an example, when he was drafted in 2003, drafted 7th by the Colorado Rockies, the Brewers had the 6th pick in the draft that year, and they used that to select Ryan Braun. However, they were going to pick Troy Tulowitzki. However, they asked him, "Are you willing to play second base for us? If you play second base, we will draft you." He said, "Nope, I am a shortstop. I am a shortstop." So they passed on him, went to the Rockies, had a great career. This is a similar situation. The Blue Jays released him, and teams knew he wasn't going to get very much money. But this is his chance to prove himself again, to say that he is back and he is still good enough to get a contract for next season.
Absolutely. It'll be very interesting to watch to see what happens down in New York with Troy Tulowitzki, especially with Didi Gregorius possibly returning to the shortstop role later in the season.
Yeah, it should be pretty interesting. I'm not sure what the Yankees are planning on doing once Gregorius comes back. I'm assuming they're going to see how Tulowitzki pans out. If he does perform well, which I truly believe he will, I could see them using him as a DH hitter. That would likely mean that Giancarlo Stanton would have to play left field, which I think they're willing to sacrifice because right now it appears that Brett Gardner is going to be their starting left fielder. It's either going to be him or Clint Frazier, and I think that the Yankees understand that they need a solid lineup. And if Tulowitzki's performing well, you got to have him in that lineup. You can't take him out. And if that means that putting Stanton and his average defensive mind out there, I think they're willing to take that risk.
Yeah, it's interesting. Of course, Troy Tulowitzki on a minor league deal, so there's not a lot of risk involved there for the Yankees. It made sense for them as they're a team that needed some of that middle infield help, especially, like I said, with Didi out. But you get into that scenario there with the DH, and if you have to put Stanton out in left field, I feel like you're just causing a big glut of outfielders because they already have, I believe, 5 or 6 outfielders for 3 positions. And
if you include Jacoby Ellsbury, it's 6.
Yeah,
but I don't know if I can
Jacoby.
include Ellsbury just because he probably won't play this season.
Well, you're still paying him, $20-something million a year. So
25.6,
yeah.
something like that. It's terrible.
Yeah, that was definitely one of the contracts to be forgotten for the Yankees in history.
Well, Brian Cashman has done a better job handing out contracts recently. I really like the way that he's done. CUA alumni, hey, Brian Cashman. But I think that within the past 10 years, this is probably the worst contract he's handed out. I mean, he hasn't handed out many other ones. Like, you got A.J. Burnett. That was probably the most recent horrendous contract I think of. Brian McCann's wasn't so great either. But, Carlos Beltran, Masahiro Tanaka, those weren't terrible contracts.
No, not at all.
This one is just on another level with how bad of a contract this is because he hasn't played in 2 years. It's been terrible.
I will give Cashman credit, though. Ellsbury was coming off a season which was unlike any other. The guy was still young. He hit over 300, 30 home runs. He had the speed. He had the pop. He was an essential leadoff hitter. And to be able to steal him from the rival Red Sox as well, just an unbelievable great opportunity. I'm sure Cashman couldn't pass. It's a shame how that turned out because Jacoby Ellsbury, definitely a talented ball player.
And it made a lot of sense at the time, too, because you paired Jacoby Ellsbury with a prime Brett Gardner at the top of your lineup. That was probably the fastest outfield in baseball that time,
Oh, absolutely.
And just to see that Jacoby Ellsbury didn't pan out, it happens, but oh well.
It does. So moving on to some other quick news here, a couple injury updates. Not a lot of significant injuries throughout baseball as we start spring training. A few, though, to look at. We have Odubel Herrera being reported to have a grade 1 hamstring injury. And Gabe Kapler said the other day through Twitter that it is unknown when he will make his spring training debut. Now, it remains to be seen if this will be a problem for the Phillies because they may or may not be welcoming another outfielder soon enough. But if for some reason it doesn't work out and they do not welcome Bryce Harper onto the field, I think that really leaves a question for center field, and I'm not really sure how that leaves you because you do have a lot of outfield options in that Phillies spring training right now, of course, with Aaron Altair, Dylan Cousins, Andrew McCutchen, Roman Quinn, and then, of course, Nick Williams. But I think it'll be interesting to see who actually would be able to play center field if Odubel Herrera is out for a significant time. Would you think it would be a guy like Andrew McCutchen?
That's who I would project to be their starting center fielder unless they sign Bryce Harper because Harper did play a little bit of center field last year. But Andrew, as a Philly fan, what are you thinking about this Odubel Herrera injury?
Well, as a Philly fan, I'm personally not that worried. Odubel Herrera, definitely a guy who I want healthy and want in the zone because when he is healthy and in the zone, we've seen what he can do. He started off last season hitting above 320. He had a monster first half and was somehow robbed of an all-star game by a certain man named Bryce Harper, ironically. But anyway, Odubel Herrera, I think it's important that he is healthy, of course. I'm not too worried about this. It's the lowest grade hamstring injury that's possible. I think he'll miss some spring training time. He should be good for opening day, though.
That's the way it appears.
Moving on to some other injuries, Clayton Kershaw, who was reported that seemed to be getting better with his injury the other day. Today was reported by Dave Roberts that Kershaw does not feel great, and that is a quote, and his throwing program that he was scheduled to begin is going to be put on hold. So how do you think that affects the Dodgers rotation? Of course, they still have Walker Buehler, but going into opening day, if Clayton Kershaw's not ready, I like to think that's not something that the Dodgers want to hear after dropping $93 million on him after he opted out of his contract.
I would most certainly agree with that. They, like you said, dropped $93 million. But to me, it's really interesting because Dave Roberts came out the other day and he publicly stated that Clayton Kershaw was still going to be their opening day starter. However, I don't think that it's going to be too much of an issue because they still have Walker Buehler, and I think that he has shown potential that he can be an ace. You can build a starting rotation around him, and that Dodger rotation is so flexible. However, it hurts me to say this, but I'm not so sure that this Clayton Kershaw deal is going to work out. I know it's only 3 years, but I think that within the next 3 years, sorry, Clayton Kershaw, but I think you're on the decline. He had back issues last year, neck issues, and now he's got these arm issues. next thing you know, it'll be a leg injury. Literally, that's everything that you need when you're a starting pitcher. You can't afford to be lacking these body parts. It's essential to being such a good pitcher. And I think that he's on the decline right now. And I hate to say it, but it's something worth mentioning.
No, I agree with that. And Clayton Kershaw, ever since he started having his back problems, it's always been something that I've said that it concerns me and that he's going to be going on a decline because the back is just so essential to a starting pitcher. And especially to him, a guy who doesn't really rely on velocity but relies on the movement of his pitches. It just does not spell, a good sign for Clayton Kershaw. But we'll see, though. Like I said, the Dodgers did give him $93 million, so they're obviously still confident in him. And look, he's one of the best pitchers, if not the best pitchers of this generation.
Oh, yeah.
So,
best pitcher
without
of
a
this
doubt,
generation.
yeah, I think it was the right move for the Dodgers to keep him. Hopefully he gets healthy and we'll be able to help them out soon. So moving on to the final news segment we have here, a couple of minor league deals reached over the past week, and it's actually funny because we see a lot of old faces finding some new teams here. Firstly, the Cleveland Indians reaching a minor league deal with spring training invitation for Hanley Ramirez. Now, Robbie, what are your thoughts on Hanley Ramirez now being a Cleveland Indian?
I thought that this was one of the most random signings. Obviously, Hanley Ramirez hasn't played since beginning of last season. I haven't seen him. I don't know if he's lost weight. I don't know how his body shape is, but I think that this is a good low-risk, high-reward situation. I felt the same way about the Troy Tulowitzki thing. If Hanley Ramirez can make the Cleveland Indians roster, he still probably has some pop in there. So I think it's a good risk to take. What do you think, Andrew?
No, I agree, and I also don't think that they have a starting first baseman right now because they said that their plan was to DH Carlos Santana, and Edwin Encarnacion, of course, was traded to the Seattle Mariners. So I think the guy they have there is just some minor leaguer they're hoping to hold over time. So if Hanley Ramirez can, have a good spring, somehow win the first base job, why not? I think it's a low-risk, high-reward signing.
I would guess it would either go to Hanley Ramirez or a guy like Brandon Guyer, but I don't know how realistic that is.
Can Brandon Guyer play first base? I thought he was more of an outfielder.
He is an outfielder, but he has played first base in the past.
Okay, fair enough.
I don't see that happening. I think Hanley Ramirez has a good chance of winning this first base spot unless they move somebody else to first base who's never played there before. I don't know who that would be, but it could be anybody.
Yeah. Moving on to some other minor signings here. The Rangers signed Logan Forsythe to a minor league deal. Nothing too interesting going on there. Forsythe, of course, spent some time with the Dodgers after being with the Padres for a number of years and also the Tampa Bay Rays.
And the Twins last year, too.
And the Twins, that's right. I forgot he was on the Twins for a little bit. And the White Sox reaching a deal with Irvin Santana, which surprised me because that is also a minor league deal. And, of course, Irvin Santana, not what he used to be. But I thought he would at least get somewhat of a major league deal. I mean, just for name's sake alone, he's a guy that's been able to be at least a consistent starting pitcher over the past 8 to 9 years. So
yeah, I would most certainly agree with that. And not only that, not last year, but the year before that, he started in that wild card game. The Twins went to him and said, "We need you to step up your game and beat the Yankees so we can go to the ALDS." Obviously, Santana failed miserably as he gave up a 3-run home run to D. Gregorius in the first inning. But I still think that last year was an injury-plagued year, had an 8.03 ERA in 5 starts. He was just never healthy, but when he was healthy 2 years ago, he was really good. So I think that this is a really good signing. It's like I said, a low-risk, high-reward signing. I love signings like this. And who knows, maybe Irvin Santana develops a pitch and winds up like Wade Miley did last year with the Brewers. What do you think, Andrew?
Yeah, I agree with that. Low-risk, high-reward chance. And also, I mean, when you take a look at the Chicago White Sox rotation, besides Michael Kopech, you don't got a whole lot going on there.
No,
so,
Lucas Giolito was pretty bad last year, too.
He was. And then they have, I think he's actually hurt now that I think about it, isn't he?
He is.
Yes.
He got Tommy John.
That's
and
right.
James Shields is gone.
James Shields has been gone. And, I mean, look, there's not a whole lot going on there with that White Sox rotation. And why not give a guy like Irvin Santana a chance?
It's a low-risk, high-reward situation.
Absolutely. I would agree with that. And finally, in the minor league deals, we just got word a couple minutes ago, actually, that Matt Wieters reaches a minor league deal with the St. Louis Cardinals.
I would have thought that Matt Wieters was going to sign a major league contract as a backup catcher if you asked me that in November. However, to me, it was clear that his free agent market was very slow.
Oh, yes.
Who's he represented by? Scott Boras? Is that who it is?
Is he a Scott Boras client? I'm actually not sure.
I'm not sure if it is, but I'm pretty sure it is. But nevertheless, it seemed like nobody had any interest in Matt Wieters. You weren't hearing much about teams possibly being interested in signing him. So I think that he's just betting on himself to maybe bounce back and have a good year. Maybe he's hoping for a major league roster invite. He can come in as a pinch hitter. Obviously, he's probably not going to start because the Cardinals have Yadier Molina back there, unless Molina struggles, but they're probably still going to start him just because of the defensive aspect. But, if Molina somehow does get hurt, Wieters could end up being the starting catcher for the St. Louis Cardinals.
And he's a solid backup, too. You get a guy, at least the way I look at it is when you have a backup catcher who you at least know his name, that's at least a pretty good sign.
Yeah, no, it is.
So definitely a good signing there. And I did just double-check on that. Matt Wieters is represented by Scott Boras.
That's what I thought,
so,
yeah.
Good call on that one. Well, that about wraps up the news briefing we have for today. And I think we should now move on to the rest of our predictions. We started last week with a quick overview of what we saw happening in the different divisions throughout baseball in the 2019 season. We didn't get fully through it, and we didn't get to the postseason, so we thought we'd go over and review a little bit of our picks, and then also get into the postseason to give you guys our thoughts on what we think could be an exciting year. So, Rob, you want to start it off just quickly going over your AL predictions for the different divisions?
Yep, so I predicted that the Yankees were going to win the AL East. I predicted that the Indians were going to win the AL Central, but it was going to be a lot closer. I think the Indians have gotten a little bit worse than they did last year. And I think the Astros are obviously going to win the AL West. I don't see much of a competition there. It looks like they're probably going to run away with the division. I don't think the Athletics are going to perform as well as they did last year. Losing Jenrys Familia. Obviously, Fernando Rodney was kind of good for them towards the end.
Yeah.
I don't know if Blake Trinan is going to go out and have a 0.66 ERA again. Andrew, what did you have in your standings?
So for my AL East, I'd have to agree with those picks there. I think that's pretty much agreed upon throughout anyone in baseball that the big three in the AL are going to win again. I have the Yankees coming in first. Now, a lot of people, of course, will probably say, well, what about those Red Sox? They're coming off a World Series. And I think the reality is, without solidification of their bullpen, they're just not as good a team as the New York Yankees. The New York Yankees went out. They improved their starting pitching with Paxton, of course, and other people. They went and just assembled a monster bullpen. Of course, Adam Ottavino, Zach Britton, not to mention already having Chapman and guys like Betances and stuff like that.
Chad Green.
Chad Green as well, not a guy that you should sleep on. Very good reliever. I've liked Chad Green, of course. And I just think that they're going to be the ones to get it done. Of course, I do see the Red Sox getting that wild card spot as well. Which reminds me, Robbie, who do you have as that last AL or as the two AL wild card teams before I move on there?
I have the the Athletics against the Red Sox.
Oh, that'll be an interesting game. I'd love to see that. So moving on to the AL Central, I have the Indians as well. I think it could be a little bit closer. I do have the Twins coming in second place, of course. Indians definitely have gotten a little worse.
Twins can surprise people.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think Nelson Cruz is going to be a good pickup for them. Reminds me a lot, I think I mentioned this last week, it reminds me a lot of the Josh Willingham signing. Willingham came out of the Nationals. He's kind of an old guy who was known for just power, and he went to the Twins, and I think he hit like 42 or 43 home runs. So.
Yeah, he did. And another one, he could end up like the Mark Trumbo signing from the Orioles. Anything could happen with this contract.
Absolutely. And so then moving on to the AL West, I think it's no question that the Astros are going to be winning that. I think if Michael Brantley stays healthy, that's just going to be an unbelievable lineup. A little bit of question with the starting pitching there, especially with Keuchel leaving. They do have Wade Miley, but he's not exactly a replacement for Dallas Keuchel. But we'll see. It'll be interesting. And then as for the two wild card spots, I'm going to have to also go with Boston and the A's. It's funny because obviously Boston, like I said, still a great team, great offense. I think they come up just short. And the A's, I just think that they have some talent there that's too good not to win that wild card. I don't think there's any other clear favorites because I don't see the Rays repeating what they did last year with the opener strategy and stuff like that. But yeah, I think guys like Chris Davis, Matt Chapman, Blake Trinan, it'll be enough to get it done, and it'll be an interesting wild card game.
Only question mark I would have for the Athletics is their starting pitching. I don't know if Sean Maeda is going to be healthy.
No, he's actually out for the entire season. I believe.
Oh, is he? Yeah, that's red flag to me. Mike Fiers, I don't know how well he's going to do again. Outside of those two, their rotation to me is not that strong. Liam Hendricks is not even a starting pitcher. He's one of those guys that, a guy like Kevin Cash would use if he were on the Rays.
Yeah.
He loves those relief pitchers that can throw 4 innings.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see what happens with the A's there. I definitely agree with that. I'm surprised they haven't gone after a guy like maybe Gio Gonzalez or Edwin Jackson or one of the starters still in the market.
I thought that Gio Gonzalez was going to end up back in Oakland, but at this point, I believe Gio Gonzalez will wind up signing a minor league deal with some random team.
Wow, that would be interesting to see, especially since he had a pretty good showing with Milwaukee after he was traded last year, but we'll have to see about that.
His market's just been really slow. All right, and for the National League, I had the Braves winning the NL East. I think the NL East is probably going to be the tightest division this year. I started some controversy last week when I said the Nationals were going to be in fourth place. That was a pretty bold prediction, but I still think the Braves get the NL East. I think the Brewers are going to get the NL Central. I think the Cardinals are going to be right on their tail, but the Brewers are going to wind up getting the latter half of the season. And I also think that the Rockies are going to be winning the NL West. I think that they're going to surpass the Dodgers. I believe that this is their year. And then for the wild card, I have the Cardinals and the Dodgers playing, and I would think that the Cardinals will win. How about you, Andrew? Who do you have?
So for the NL East, I agree. It's going to be definitely the tightest division in baseball, in my opinion. I have two different scenarios for the NL East just because I feel like there's a few things that could change in that division still, just maybe.
Oh, gosh. I wonder who.
But, yeah, so as of right now, my standings would have the Nationals at first place with the Phillies behind them at second, Braves in third, and Mets in fourth. Now, I just see that as I think the Nationals are just still a very good team, and I think they underperformed last year. As a Phillies fan, they still scare me a lot because Patrick Corbin just makes that rotation just locked and loaded. I mean, when you have the ability to go Scherzer, Strasburg, Corbin, not to mention their four guy being Anibal Sanchez, which is not even that bad, I just think they're a great team. I think Rendon's going to have a great year approaching his free agent year, and I think Juan Soto picks it up as well. I don't even think they need Bryce Harper, but as of right now, I believe that they would be winning it. Now, if the Phillies do manage to sign Bryce Harper, that's where my alternate scenario would be, where I have them winning the division. I think that they have all the pieces, but they are just that one big star power left-handed bat away from being able to take over the rest of the guys of the division. They improved their bullpen. They improved their lineup. They improved their defense. They essentially improved everything. They just need that last big piece, and I think Harper puts them over the top. Moving on to the NL Central. I also have the Brewers taking that division. I think the Brewers are a great team. I think they're definitely going to be able to run away with that division. But the Cardinals definitely as well. That's a lineup that if I was in the NL Central, I would be very scared of. The addition of Goldschmidt just
I would agree.
makes
And
it unbelievable.
let me ask you this, Andrew. Do you think Christian Yelich, Lorenzo Cain, Jesus Aguilar, do you think they have the same kind of season that they have last year? Because I think that they're going to drop off, but not tremendously. I still think they'll be pretty productive.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting point because I think a lot of people knew that Christian Yelich was a good player, but didn't necessarily think that he was this superstar that he became last year. And I think he can sustain it. I think him getting out of Marlins Park was just the ticket that he needed to start his superstar career. I think he retains it. A guy that I don't think attains that is Jesus Aguilar. I know his power is still there, but the guy came out of nowhere, and I'm not sure if he's going to be able to, keep putting up those power numbers. And the fact that he hit for a high average, I believe, too. He was like a 280 or 298.
Yeah, hit to like 278, something like that.
Yeah, I just think that was unheard of. I don't know if he'll be able to sustain it. Same with Lorenzo Cain, still a very talented player. Not sure if he'll be able to sustain it as well, but if they do, look, that's a great Brewers team, and we saw what they were able to do last year. Not to mention the addition of Yasmani Grandal as well.
Yeah, I'm not that high on Yasmani Grandal, though. I'm not going to lie. Ever since he joined the Dodgers, I think the highest he's ever hit was 242. He's clearly not an offensive-minded catcher. Also, he got exposed in the playoffs. He could not catch a baseball to save his life, so that kind of scares me a little bit.
Yeah, agreed there. Yasmani Grandal, of course, never been a guy who hit for high average. He does have the power, though. He has a little bit of pop, and I think the fact that he's a switch hitter also made him very appealing to the Brewers. So we'll see what happens there. Moving on to the NL West, I would have to disagree with that. I still have the Dodgers out there. I think the Padres start showing. They're not going to do anything great this year, but they're going to start showing that maybe they aren't a joke anymore. But let's be honest, it is the Padres. I think they'll find a way to become a joke in the end.
Probably.
As for the wild card teams then, I'm going to base it off of the current situation instead of the hypothetical Harper signing with Philly situation. And I'm going to say that the wild card will be the Cardinals and the Phillies.
That sounds pretty reasonable. I still think that it's going to be the Cardinals and Dodgers, but you really wouldn't have the Rockies making the wild card?
No, I don't. And the thing that concerns me with Colorado has always been the starting pitching. And I know Kyle Freeland had a great year last year. German Marquez looked pretty solid.
John Gray,
he didn't look as solid, but he still looks pretty good. And I just think it comes down to the Rockies. Can their offense carry them enough? Because they have that explosive offense. They always had as a franchise. But the question remains, is the starting pitching enough? And I don't think it will be. And it's funny because looking over this list and listening to yours, I noticed something that we both have in common with our list that I think a lot of people may be questioning. And that's the fact that the Chicago Cubs are not in either of our playoffs.
I think that this is the year where the Cubs don't make the playoffs. I have a bold prediction that this is Joe Maddon's last year in Chicago. I don't think he returns after this season. To me, it seems like ever since he joined the Cubs in, 2015?
Yeah,
they have, after their World Series win in 2016, they have slowly regressed. I mean, they couldn't even get past the NL wildcard last year.
Yeah.
And the potential, the team is there, the potential's there. They brought in Yu Darvish to a big contract. Jason Hayward, Ben Zobrist, all these guys have came in. You spend a lot of money on Anthony Rizzo and his contract
Lester
extension.
as well.
John Lester too. And making the big trade for Jose Quintana, blowing that farm system up. So I think Theo Epstein has provided Joe Maddon with a formidable team, a team that should be able to be strong playoff contenders. And he brought in Cole Hamels last year too, who was great. And even with Cole Hamels, you still couldn't make it past the wild card. I don't think that this team is making the playoffs this year. And I'm sorry, Joe Maddon, but I think this is your last year in Chicago. And I feel like if Theo Epstein keeps making these questionable signings, I could see him on his way out too.
Yeah, I think that's definitely an interesting point there. We'll have to see what happens with the Cubs. Speaking of Yu Darvish, actually, it's funny that you mentioned that. I read today that he made his first start on the mound since May of last year, and he did not last the inning, I believe. So that'll be interesting.
I did not see how he did, but I think he should still be okay. I don't believe he's going to be as good as he once was. I think that Theo Epstein made a huge mistake signing him.
Oh, without question.
At the time, it looked like it was genius. Oh, another bad contract. Tyler Chatwood, one of the worst contracts in baseball.
Terrible.
I don't understand why the Cubs would give a 3-year contract to a guy who just came off of a year where he had a 4.06 ERA. Might have been 4 years. It was just a total disaster. It made no sense at the time, and it makes no sense now.
Absolutely, I would agree with that.
And for your pennants, who do you have?
So, actually, we got to talk about the who wins the wild card game first.
Oh, yeah, you want to talk about that? Oh, yeah, I already mentioned Mike wild card.
Oh, you mentioned who? Did you mention who wins each, though?
Yeah, I did. I said the Red Sox win the AL wild card, and the Cardinals win the NL wild card game.
Okay, so, yeah, my wild card matchup, I have the Phillies, no bias at all, going over the Cardinals in the NL, and I have Boston over the A's, of course. Which, of course, then, as we move into the NLDS, sets up an exciting Yankees-Red Sox ALDS once again. Out of that, of course, I will put the Yankees. I think they just have what it takes to get it done. And again, I think the bullpen, especially in a 5-game series, the bullpen's very important. If the Red Sox can't improve that bullpen, the Yankees are going to be able to take that. Astros-Indians, the other ALDS matchup, I'm going with the Astros all the way. Indians, they're going to be able to win the division. I don't think they can go far in the postseason, though. How about your ALDS matchups, Robbie? What do you got there?
I actually think that the Yankees are also going to beat the Red Sox. I think that this year is the Yankees' year. It looks like obviously the Red Sox bullpen is a major question mark, but I also believe that this year the Yankees are going to go out and acquire one more starting pitcher at the trade deadline. It seems like every year they've always tried to make that one trade, the one trade that's going to put them over the top. They tried it with Sonny Gray. They've tried it with the Chase Headley deal. They've tried it with so many deals in the past, but this year I believe that they're going to make another move. And last year was Zach Britton as well to improve their bullpen, but I think that they're going to make one move, and this move is going to, I think it's going to take them over the hump, and yeah, they should be good. And then, for the Indians and the Astros, I still think that I think the Astros are going to repeat what they did last year. They're going to blow the Indians right out of the water. I don't see the Indians doing that much this season. I don't know if Trevor Bauer is going to be as good as he was last year. Corey Kluber, I think he's going to start declining sometime soon. I really like Mike Clevenger. I'm really high on him. However, that Astros pitching rotation does get me a little bit worried this year. However, I don't think it's going to be enough to lose to the Indians. So I have the Yankees against the Astros in the ALCS this year. And it's going to be a rematch of what happened in 2017. And what about you? What do you have for your ALCS?
Yeah, so for the LCS there, like I said, I have the Yankees and Astros.
That's right.
Yeah, moving on to the NL, Phillies-Nats sets up as an NL matchup in my scenario, which will be interesting because you got the Phillies back in the playoffs for the first time since 2011, and the Nats in it again, still trying to win their first postseason series in franchise history. And let me just say, if this scenario does actually happen in real life, and Bryce Harper's on the Phillies and he faces the Nationals in a postseason series and beats the Nationals, that would be probably the most satisfying thing that I've ever seen in my life. I know it wouldn't be for a lot of the Nationals fans listening, but that would be absolutely hilarious. And you got to start feeling bad for the Nats at some point. But
Yep, haven't won a division or haven't won a playoff series since they became the Nationals.
No, they haven't won a playoff series ever. Even when they were the Expos.
Yeah, that's right.
They never won. Yeah.
Not even with Vladimir Guerrero. Are you kidding me? Oh my.
Well,
gosh.
actually, the
And
year
quickly-
that they had Vlad and the year that they had all those ridiculous guys, I think Andre Dawson was on that team as
he
well.
was.
That was also 1994 when they were going off like crazy. And, of course, we know what happened in 1994 with the strike, so they never actually got to have a postseason that year. Nats fans, just unlucky. It's a shame. But and then, of course, the other NLDS matchup I have, Dodgers-Brewers. And I have the Brewers just taking it away there. I think the Brewers, again, like I said, great team this year. So that sets up an NLCS of the Phillies, Brewers, and Yankees-Astros for me. Robbie, what are your matchups there?
For my NLDS, I have the Braves facing the Cardinals. I think that the Braves are going to pull this one out. I think it's going to be a little bit closer than expected. People are going to start questioning, are the Braves really legit? I don't know how this playoff series will play out, but I would guess the Braves would probably beat the Cardinals. I really like the additions of Paul Goldschmidt to the team. I thought that was good. I think Marcell Ozuna will bounce back. And then for my other series, I have the Brewers facing the Rockies, and I would probably go with the Brewers winning that series. I don't think that I have the Rockies winning that. I don't think the Brewers would have what it takes to beat the Rockies this year. I think that this is the Rockies' year.
Okay, that's a very fair point. Then moving on to our pennant matchups, Phillies Brewers. In my scenario, I'm going with the Brewers in that case. Look, even as a Phillies fan, I can't deny that we're there. But in this scenario, without Bryce Harper, I just don't think we'll be able to go over the top there. So I got the Brewers going to the World Series. And in the LCS, Yankees Astros. I have a 7-game series. It'll be long and hard, but I got to give it the edge to the Yankees there.
Sounds
it's
good.
It's just too good of a bullpen, too good of a lineup, and I think that they're going to be able to get that done. How about you?
I have the Yankees beating the Astros in the ALCS. I think that the Yankees I think that this series goes to, I'm going to say 6 games. I think that the Yankees are going to have the motivation from 2017. And listen, this Yankee team is stronger than that team in 2017. And the Astros team, in my opinion, hasn't gotten any better. You added Roberto Osuna and lost Ken Giles, but that's it. You lost Dallas Keuchel. You lost Charlie Morton. You lost Marwin Gonzalez. And who do you replace him with? Michael Brantley? Wade Miley? I don't know if that's enough. I think that the Yankees have motivation to beat the Astros this year. I think that this year the Yankees are going to make it to the World Series. And then for my National League, I have the Rockies taking the National League. I believe that they are going to go to 6 games, but I like I said, I believe that this is the Rockies' year. I think that Nolan Arenado is going to have an MVP candidate season. I think Charlie Blackmon's great. And one of the most underrated moves this past offseason, in my opinion, has been the Daniel Murphy signing. How does Daniel Murphy keep being underappreciated? He is a guy that's going to thrive in Coors Field. The guy can hit for average, and he can hit for power too. I think that he goes off for the Rockies this year. And despite losing DJ LeMahieu, I think they're going to be perfectly okay.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that a lot of people... Yeah, I agree with that. I think a lot of people don't look at that Daniel Murphy signing as one of the big things of the offseason. But the reality is Daniel Murphy being able to play first base, not worry about the defense as much, and hit in Coors Field for 160 games a year, that's going to do insane things for his numbers. I mean, let's not forget, the guy hit, 330 when he joined Washington after he was with the Mets for a little bit?
He was a contender for the batting title every single year.
He was, yeah. And I think that's definitely something a lot of people overlook, but I can definitely see Daniel Murphy having an insane year this year. And that was That was a 2-year deal, I believe?
3 years, I think.
3 years, okay. So that'll be interesting to see where that goes there.
And it wasn't even worth that much money anyway, so.
No, I think it was under $30 million. I only think it was like 20-something.
Yeah.
Yeah, so very good deal for the Rockies there. So I believe then I give my ALCS and NLCS. So I have in the World Series then a Yankees-Brewers World Series. It sounds like you have a Yankees-Rockies World Series over there. So let's go ahead with you first. As the Yankees fan in the room, I can only imagine who's winning this matchup of the Yankees and the Rockies.
I think this is very clear and consensus here. The Yankees are winning the World Series this year. This is their year. Adding Adam Ottavino, DJ LeMahieu, James Paxton, those were the final pieces to this team. This team was made to be built like this. They have young talent, and their one issue last year was their starting rotation. James Paxton solidifies that. And as I said earlier, I think that they need one more starting pitcher to make this over with, and I think that they will go get that starting pitcher. Now, I have a feeling I know where this is going to go. Who do you have winning the World Series?
Well, in my World Series, I not only have a 7-game series, but I've also spelled out the series MVP because I'm just that confident in this guy. And in this Yankees-Brewers series, after 7 games, I believe the 2019 World Series champions are going to be the Milwaukee Brewers. And with Josh Hader being the overwhelming World Series MVP after he comes in 6 of the 7 games and either closes them out or holds them where they are. I think the Brewers are a team that are going to be slept on beyond belief into this World Series. I think everyone's going to have the Yankees winning, and I think that they're just going to pull it out of nowhere, and they're going to be able to overcome the big Yankee machine, as they so say.
Well, to me, the interesting thing is the Yankees have won a World Series every single decade since they were a franchise except the 1980s. They know that this is their last chance to win a World Series in the 2010s. They are going to use that as motivation. They're going to use everything as motivation. Aaron Hicks recently said that he has not gotten over losing in the playoffs. He knows how badly he wants it. This is CeCe Sabathia's last season. These veterans are going to step up and use that as motivation to build this team's confidence and say, this is our year. We have to win the World Series. And I think Josh Hader is going to do very well in the postseason. However, I still don't have the Brewers getting there. But say the Brewers do get there. Josh Hader is not enough to beat a team. There has not been an instance that I can remember where a relief pitcher single-handedly shut down a team, especially a lineup as strong as the Yankees.
Well, it comes to mind at least Andrew Miller in the 2016 postseason, where he just absolutely dominated every team he faced.
But that Indians team had so much extra power. They had so much more power.
Oh no, without a doubt.
Brewers team.
Yeah. So, I'm just saying for the situation of one single reliever dominating a team. I'm saying Andrew Miller definitely comes to mind, and to an extent, Aroldis Chapman until of course the very end, where it was obviously he was overused by Joe Madden, and he gave up that home run to Rajai Davis.
Mm-hmm. Also, that year with Andrew Miller, however, Cody Allen was tremendous.
Oh,
that
absolutely,
year.
yes.
He was great. Also, I remember Oliver Perez came out of nowhere. He was really good that year too.
Oliver Perez, that's right.
Yeah, and then with the Aroldis Chapman, I thought he did really well, but it was clear in the World Series he was starting to get a little gassed out. He blew a couple saves here and there, but he still pitched pretty well. But I don't think he's the reason why the Cubs were able to win the World Series. So I think that Josh Hader will make an impact, but I don't think he's going to change the series. Like I said, he'll make a strong impact, but I'm not too worried about him.
That's a very fair point. We shall see. I think it's a pretty much consensus throughout the baseball world and the Vegas betting odds that the Yankees seem like the overwhelming favorites to start the season to be World Series champions. But baseball is a 162-game season. Anything can happen. We don't know, and we'll be able to see that as the season unfolds, Robbie.
Yes, sir. You got it.
So, moving on now to our next segment, we figured we would give a little brief overview of the offseason by talking about the best and the worst transactions so far in this offseason. So,
yep,
Robbie,
there have been a few good, a few interesting transactions. Some good and some bad. This should be an interesting list.
Absolutely. So I figure we can go back and forth for the best and worst. So why don't you start off with what you think your, I guess we'll go in order here. So your third worst offseason move.
So originally I put Caleb Joseph being let go by the Baltimore Orioles. But really the third worst that I have was A.J. Pollock signing with the Dodgers. Many of you guys know I was not a huge fan of that. I don't know why the Dodgers gave him, 6 years and $55 million or whatever?
They gave him 4 years, $55
4 years, $55. That made no sense to me whatsoever. You're the Los Angeles Dodgers. You already have Cody Bellinger in your outfield, Jock Peterson, Chris Taylor. Why would you go out and add A.J. Pollock, a guy who's frequently been injured? And Andrew Friedman, their owner, he has repeated saying, we want to get under this luxury tax threshold. They have gone way over, and they still haven't won.
No, actually, they're not over yet. They're right at the threshold right now.
Okay,
yeah.
But after the signing, though, It's probably
No. The signing put them at around, I believe, 192 or 196, and the threshold is, I think, like 203.
Yeah, it's 203.
Yeah.
But to be fair, this kind of, to me, signaled that they were not getting Bryce Harper. So I had that as the third worst move this offseason. What about you, Andrew?
So for my third best then move of the offseason, I would have to easily go with, and actually it's interesting, I have a tie for the third spot. And I have this between, for the third best, I have a tie. And I have this between the Yankees getting James Paxton and the Braves signing Josh Donaldson. So now let me explain both of those. Firstly, with the Yankees went into this offseason. They knew they needed their big starter in that rotation to complement Luis Severino and to solidify the rotation. They got exactly that with James Paxton, a tremendous left-handed starting pitcher, great velocity, great movement. And I think the best thing about this was a lot of people did hate the fact that they had to give up Sheffield for him, but I think the Yankees have such a deep farm system pitching-wise that they're able to recover from this easily. It's not that big of a deal that they gave up Sheffield to get Paxton. And the fact that obviously the Yankees are in win-now mode without a doubt, and a guy like Sheffield, while he may be great one day, he's not helping you win in 2019. By moving him to get a guy like James Paxton, you are saying 2019 is the year that we want to win, and we're doing what it takes to win this year. So I really like that move with Paxton. I think it fulfilled a great need for them, especially coming before Patrick Corbin even signed, and a lot of people had Patrick Corbin going to the Yankees anyway. I think he's a better pitcher, honestly, than Patrick Corbin, so I think that was a great move for them. As for Donaldson, I mean, we're looking at a former MVP here, and signing the one-year deal for $23 million. I believe that this is, without a doubt, a great chance for him to come into Atlanta and have a huge bounce-back year after being injured the past couple years and just get paid next offseason. Now, he is going to be a bit older. He's going to be about 32 years old, I believe. But if he can go into Atlanta, he can help them out by having a great year. And if he can have a great year, he can help himself by proving to everyone who didn't want to give him that long-term deal this year, next year, and say, hey, look, I'm still the elite player that I used to be. I think I deserve that big money. And I think if he does that, he'll have no problem getting that big money.
I would agree. And I'm one of those people who advocates that there is no such thing as a bad one-year deal.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you can get rid of the guy after, even if he struggles. It's low risk, high risk. I know they spent, what was it, $20 million on him?
$23 million.
$23 million?
Yeah.
So that's probably not the smartest move. I don't know if I would have spent that much money on him, but it's only a one-year deal, so you're not risking too much with the signing.
No, not at all. It's 1 year. You pay him his $23 million, and you see what happens afterwards. I think it was a great addition for the Atlanta Braves.
I would agree.
So, moving on to you again, what do you think your third best option is for the move of the offseason?
Originally, I was going to put the Reds acquiring Alex Wood, Yasiel Puig, and Matt Kemp. I thought that move was underrated. I think Yasiel Puig has a great year this year. He's a free agent after the season, and I think he's going to want a big payday. Same thing with Alex Wood, too. Upcoming free agent. However, I did not go with this move. I actually went with Daniel Murphy to the Colorado Rockies. I know we were talking about that a few minutes ago.
Absolutely.
I love this signing. Put him in Coors Field, a hitter's ballpark, a guy who hits for average. He fits perfectly in that lineup. They needed a guy who could hit for average because DJ LeMahieu clearly wasn't that guy anymore. He was slowly developing more into a power hitter. DJ LeMahieu's not the guy who could hit 340 anymore. He's more like the guy who's going to hit 280 with 20 home runs now. So they needed a guy who they could put at the top of their lineup and hit for average. Murphy's not the greatest fielder, but you put him at first base, and you're not losing too much. And also, he's not the fastest, but I still think that won't be too much of a pain.
Absolutely. Right. Playing in Coors is going to be great for Daniel Murphy.
Your third worst move?
So my third worst move was actually also A.J. Pollock. Instead of rehashing some of the things you said, because I had essentially a lot of the same things, I just wanted to quickly mention, not sure if you're aware of this actually, but A.J. Pollock has only had 1 year in his entire career where he eclipsed 500 plate appearances. And that was 2015. You want to talk about a guy who's injury prone? A.J. Pollock is that guy. And the fact that they gave him 4 years and guaranteed $55 million, unbelievable. They could essentially be paying for Pollock to be on the DL for much of the 4 years. So since you already mentioned that, I'm not going to go any more into Pollock. So I'll go into my next option, and that's actually Lance Lynn's 3-year, $30 million deal with the Texas Rangers.
Oh, that was such a bad deal.
This deal made absolutely no sense to me. You're paying essentially $30 million for what I think is the model of an average pitcher. This guy, of course, last year had a high ERA with the Twins, was 4.77, and it was even worse when he went over to the Yankees. Although I believe the Yankees used him as a sort of a reliever, I believe.
Well,
right?
He was a starting pitcher for his first few games because in his debut when he came over, He pitched really well, actually. However, they thought, okay, he might be, the low-risk, high-reward guy like Brandon McCarthy was a few years ago. So they slid him into the rotation, and gosh, was that a bad move. He was terrible for them. ERA of 5.23 with the Yankees. It was just total disaster.
Oh, absolutely. And look, we're looking at a guy here who's old. He's past his prime days in St. Louis. And it seemed like he got this big money with the lack of starting pitching left on the market at the time. Of course, there was still a couple big names left, Dallas Keuchel being one of those names who is still available. But I don't think Texas was ever seriously thinking about a guy like Dallas Keuchel or Patrick Corbin. So I guess it made sense for the Rangers because they needed some starting pitching help, but I feel like this just wasn't the way to go. I feel like Texas is going to be paying a lot for a very average pitcher.
I would agree with that. Very average. Now, my second worst move of the offseason, you're not going to like this, but I said the Phillies signing Andrew McCutchen and David Robertson.
Robertson too? Really?
Just both of those guys combined. I was not a big advocate of this move. I didn't understand why. Okay, they said that they were going to spend stupid money. And if you're spending stupid money...
I've never heard that quote before.
If you're going to spend stupid money on Andrew McCutchen and David Robertson, who I believe both are slowly on the decline, I like Andrew McCutchen because he gets on base. He's not a bad fielder. He's an average fielder. I like that. However,
positive defensive WAR.
Yeah. So I think he's got that going for him. However, I think he's going to get possibly injured because he's slowly starting to get old. And I didn't mind David Robertson getting 2 years. However, I just didn't think that this was much of a need for this team. I thought that they should have focused more on starting pitching, solidify that starting rotation and make a few trades here and there and just build with what you got and hopefully trade a guy like Maikel Franco, get some prospects or even bullpen help, and, try and sign Manny Machado or Bryce Harper.
Just to respond to a couple of those things there as a guy who watched every Phillies game last year. Firstly, bullpen, definitely something we needed to help with. And I agree, starting pitching is something I still think we need to address, even if we do sign Bryce Harper. But bullpen needed a solidified force in there. David Robertson has been a model of consistency. He's been a guy who's been able to just go out there and do his job for the past 5 years, minus the one outlier year.
I would not be surprised. I would not be surprised if he was on the decline pretty soon, though. His velocity was down last year, and in that second half, the first half, his ERA was around 2.82, and he wound up with an ERA of 3.23. His second half was clearly not the same. His cutter wasn't moving the way it once was. His knuckle curve just wasn't as good. I think he's going to be decent for the Phillies, but I don't think he's going to be what many of their fans are expecting.
That's a fair point. And, of course, with McCutchen, I agree. It seemed like it was a little too much money, but the fact of the matter is it doesn't really matter for the Phillies because they just have so much available with that new TV deal. I think they figured, why not? Bring in McCutchen. He's a well-known name. He's a guy who can still get on base, as you said, which Gabe Kapler loves. He's
that was
huge
good.
On-base guy.
That'll help them.
Yeah, he'll definitely help the lineup there. And, I think that's fair. I don't think it was a dumb move, especially because that just allows us to get another outfield out there and move Rhys Hoskins to first base. I'll talk about that a little later with one of my best deals. But moving on then, I believe I will give my next best deal. And speaking of Rhys Hoskins, we're going to go right to that. I think that the second best deal of the offseason was trading Carlos Santana and J.P. Crawford from the Philadelphia Phillies to the Seattle Mariners for Gene Segura, Juan Nicasio, and James Pazos. And Robbie, let me tell you why I love this deal so much. Because Rhys Hoskins is not a left fielder. And it was obvious from day one that this guy should not be out there in left field. And the Phillies ignored these obvious signs, signed Carlos Santana to a $60 million whatever the heck deal it was to put him at first base and Rhys out in left. And Carlos Santana hit 220. And yes, he got on base, and Gabe Kapler loves that, but he didn't do much more besides that. So I think being able to trade, not only unload his entire salary onto the Seattle Mariners, but to get back a guy like Gene Segura, who is exactly what this team needed. A guy who can actually play defense at shortstop, a guy who can actually hit for average, a guy who's a 200 hit guy annually. That's exactly what this Phillies club needed, and the front office realized that, and they went out and got him. Not to mention James Pazos, who, let's be honest, he's not Andrew Miller here in his prime, but he's a very solid lefty for a team whose best lefty last year was Adam Morgan. And if you're not a Phillies fan, let's just say that Adam Morgan is not exactly the greatest left-handed specialist, considering he can't get a left-hander out normally.
Yeah.
I think that deal was great. And, of course, the big thing, improving the defense, which was historically bad for the Phillies last year. getting Rhys Hoskins back to first base. And J.P. Crawford, a guy who 2 times has been tried to be brought up by the Phillies and got injured both times. I think J.P. Crawford's days of being a top prospect are well beyond him. I don't think he's going to develop to anything more than, say, I'm trying to think of a good comparison. Maybe a worse Jorge Polanco. Maybe that.
Yeah.
I'll say that. I don't think he's going to be anything. I love JP. He was the symbol of our rebuild for many years, but let's be honest, I don't think he's going anywhere. So that's my second best move there. And I believe we were on your second best as well. So what do you got for that?
So for my second best move, I actually have the Yankees and the Phillies re-signing Luis Severino and Aaron Nola. I was huge when this happened. I was very happy. It made so much sense. It was perfect for them. Because if the Yankees or Phillies stink in a few years, they can simply unload these contracts for a top prospect. It makes so much sense. And if you want to contend, you're not paying that much for these guys anyways. They're making approximately $10 million a year, and I just thought it was a great signing.
Oh, that is an unbelievably great signing. When I got the news that we extended Aaron Nola to I believe it was
4 years and
48 million. 45 million?
Yeah, 45, yep.
Just an unbelievable steal. I mean, we're talking about a guy who broke out last year, who was a 10-win player on the team, and who was in third place for the Cy Young, and we were able to lock him up for 4 years for only $48 million. Just absolutely insane. And then, of course, a few days following that, the Luis Severino deal. It's almost the same situation with the Yankees. You got a guy who broke out a couple years ago who's a legit Cy Young candidate when he's healthy, great velocity, great pitcher all around, and to be able to lock him up on such a team-friendly deal, not only does it guarantee you that you have them during your next year's competing, but if something were to happen with either the Phillies or the Yankees, that deal being so team-friendly makes them super easy to trade.
Yeah, I really like these deals. I think that it's, great move from both sides. I'm very happy with this as a Yankee fan. Now, what are you on, the worst move of your offseason?
I'm on the worst move of the offseason, and I think you'll like this as a Yankees fan, but I truly believe this just as someone who's a baseball fan. Nathan Eovaldi to the Red Sox for 4 years, $67.5 million. I think this is without a doubt the biggest mistake I have seen in a very long time. With Nathan Eovaldi, we're talking about a guy who, yes, he had a great season and a legendary postseason as kind of a pseudo-starter reliever, and I think Boston will always remember that, of course. But the reality is, we're talking about a guy here who has 2 Tommy John surgeries already under his belt and only 1 season where he's made more than 30 starts. This is a guy who is injury-prone, and yes, he still throws hard, but is being relied on for 1 good season based on last year to get all this money. And for 4 years, 67.5, and the fact that I think he's already almost 30 years old, I believe. I think he's 28
He was
or 29.
born in 1990, yeah, 29.
Unbelievable. And for the next 4 years, I feel like they're going to be paying for a guy who gets hurt again, and I don't even know if he'll reach the entire 4 years. He might get hurt and be done by the end of it.
Yeah, I could most certainly see that. I was not crazy about the Eovaldi signing. However, before I state what my worst signing or what worst move was, the reason I didn't put Nathan Eovaldi up there was because I think that Eovaldi still could end up being something good. He shut down the Yankees last year, not only with the Red Sox, but also with the Tampa Bay Rays. He shut them down. They could not hit this guy. So that's why I didn't put them there, because as I said many times, I believe the Yankees are winning the World Series this year, and the Red Sox need a guy that can shut down that lineup in order for them to stop the Yankees from making it. However, I do see him getting hurt. But the worst move I have this offseason, before I actually say that, a few nominees I put was Patrick Corbin to the Washington Nationals. Made no sense why they gave him such a big deal. I know that they needed this guy. They were competing with the Yankees, and who was the other team they were competing with? The Phillies. That's who it was. They were competing with them, and they obviously needed that third starting pitcher. However, I did not think that you had to give Patrick Corbin $140 million. I think that 130 or 125 would have done the job. Also, I wasn't crazy about the 6 years. I didn't like that as a baseball fan.
Way too long for starting pitcher who's 30.
But the worst move of this offseason was, as you stated earlier, Lance Lynn to the Texas Rangers. Made no sense to me whatsoever. I don't see where the Rangers are going with this. This is a kind of move that you make if you're trying to compete. The Rangers are not competing this year. Sorry, Ranger fans, but you're not competing next year, and probably not the year after that. I think that sooner or later they're going to trade Joey Gallo and Renaud Odor for some good prospects, but I don't see you guys competing. I think that starting rotation is historically awful.
Oh, yes.
I mean, outside of Lance Lynn, who do they have in that rotation? I mean,
I'm going to be honest, I don't think I can name anyone else in that rotation.
I mean, is Mike Minor still there?
Mike Minor is, but they used him a lot as a lefty specialist out of the bullpen last year.
So exactly my point. That starting rotation is so weak, and I don't think that they had to go out and spend $40 million on Lance Lynn to do that. I think that they would have been perfectly fine trying a Wade Miley, trying Gio Gonzalez, somebody. Lance Lynn's your option? Come on.
It just makes no sense, and especially like you said, for the money they gave him. Just unbelievable.
Worst move of the offseason.
So as we're wrapping up here, we're about to be at time here, just to give my final thoughts here on my best move of the offseason. And it's interesting because I thought for sure that you'd mention this as well, but I have as the best move of the offseason, Paul Goldschmidt to the St. Louis Cardinals for Carson Kelly, Jeff Weaver, and Young, who I don't even remember who that is. I think he's some
some single-A prospect. He was really low.
Some single-A guy. But here's the thing. This guy, I believe, is the best first baseman in baseball, and there's a great chance that Paul Goldschmidt is enamored with the city of St. Louis and easily re-signs there for, however much money he wants. But the best part about this, the guys that they gave up to get Paul Goldschmidt, a bunch of lottery tickets. Carson Kelly, of course, has always been a top prospect, but never was really amounting to anything. Jeff Weaver showed that he was nothing more than an average 3-4 mid-rotation kind of guy. And you're getting, again, the best first baseman in baseball inserted to a lineup that already has guys like Matt Carpenter, Paul DeYoung, Harrison Bader. I think St. Louis is going to be great. I think it's a great move for them in this win-now mode. And I'll tell you what, NL Central, even with the Reds, it's going to be really interesting to watch this year. There's a lot of great divisions in baseball this year.
And before we end the show, I will give my best move of this offseason. As a biased Yankees fan, my best move was all the moves that the Yankees made.
Wow.
DJ LeMahieu, Adam Ottavino, Zach Britton, bringing back J.A. Happ, acquiring James Paxton.
J.A. Happ, though, really?
Okay, maybe not the J.A. Happ.
I was going to say.
Okay, that one might have been a bit excessive. Yeah. However, he was very good against the Red Sox last year.
No, he was, yeah.
Against the Red Sox, had like a 2.36
No, I
ERA.
believe against the entire AL East, he has an ERA under 3, I believe.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
I like these moves. I think that without these moves, they would not be the World Series favorites. But because they made such smart moves, I think that this is their year. And that was the best one.
Well, it certainly seems like Robbie has a favorite for the World Series champion in 2019.
A little bit biased.
Just a little bit. So we'll have to see how that pans out there. So that'll about wrap up today's show. Thank you again for watching. Next week, hopefully, we got some more news on these big free agents left. Dallas Keuchel, Craig Kimbrell, Bryce Harper still remained unsigned. It's going to be March next week when we come to you, so hopefully we got some news on that. Other than that, thanks again for watching. This has been Nation's Pastime from the nation's capital. I'm Andrew here with Robbie, and have a great night.
Peace out.